Nahida is back, and while you might be tempted to pull for her signature weapon, we'll be taking a look at some, well, very nice options you might already have, which could be considered one of her best weapons.
She's got 3 main ways of usage and thus 3 different builds, and this is going to affect the viability of her weapons in 3 different ways. And those 3 ways are going to be the mono bloom team, the on-field DPS Nahida, and the off-field DPS Nahida. Now, while the bloom team's kind of over on its own, the on and off-field DPS is traditionally Nahida is going to have some sort of electro character in the party because hyper bloom or the aggravate / quicken reactions are too good. And then you have the on-field one where you're just spread spamming with Nahida as your main DPS. Now, the one thing all 3 of these builds are going to have in common is access to the Magic Guide. Now, the Magic Guide is a 3-star book that you can easily refine because it's so easy to gain access to. It has a ton of elemental mastery, more than some of the 4-star options that we'll go over, and also gives you damage bonus if the enemy is afflicted by either Electro or Hydro. And for the vast majority of pretty much every team Nahida is going to be in, you're going to have either an Electro character or a Hydro character or multiples of them that spam these elements. And so for most builds, this thing's going to be incredibly powerful, and we're going to use this as the baseline for our damage. That'll be very easy for you guys to follow along when we showcase the weapons. Now, the 3 different playstyles Nahida has access to, the easiest one to talk about real quick is in fact going to be the Bloom team, because Bloom builds just care about a ton of elemental mastery, and Nahida is going to be built as one of the primary carries of all of the elemental mastery gear. Traditionally, you'll have one other character, but Nahida in a Bloom team is going to be built that way. And so Magic Guide is also pretty good there. You have access to Magic Guide as a 3-star, which is the best 3-star. Then you have access to Sacrificial Fragments, which has a little bit more elemental mastery, a little bit easier particle generation because you get to reuse your E, and then obviously the best one by far is going to be her own unique signature 5-star that is available right now. Now, each of these weapons in a Bloom team are just a little bit better than the previous one, so use whatever copy you have lying around that's the highest level that gives you the highest elemental mastery for that Bloom team. Now, with the easy one out of the way, let's move into the on and off field DPS weapon tier list. And just so you know, each of these weapons were compared fairly. Everyone was using the same build, the same set, and we were also allocating the substats to make the best use of the weapon substats as well. Layman's terms, that means if the weapon has a ton of crit rate on it and it's mathematically better to change out some crit rate substats for crit damage, we do that. And that gives you the best opportunity to see how much damage changes with the best build for a particular weapon. Now, starting with the off-field tier list first, we're going to be starting with none other than the R5 version of the Magic Guide. Now, this weapon's fantastic for Nahida as it not only gives you elemental mastery to help with reaction damage, but her E proc also scales with elemental mastery in addition to that. That's not the greatest part. You also have the refinement Bane of Storm and Tide, and Dendro loves both Electro as well as Hydro, and if she's the sole off-field DPS, your Dendro Reactioner, she's going to be able to apply Bane of Storm and Tide to everything she does. On equal footing with the R5 Magic Guide for damage, but a little bit better for particle generation and ease of use as to put the E debuff on additional enemies when you need to is Sacrificial Fragments, higher elemental mastery, and the reset's a pretty big deal, right around the same amount of damage as the R5 Magic Guide, but you get the reset and a little bit additional particle generation. The Woodsith is still a fantastic option for Nahida, but you have to keep in mind it has a 30-second cooldown on it, and the duration is not nearly that long, so it drags it down in overall damage throughout the course of a 30-second to 1-minute fight, and so we wanted to sort of show you guys that here. If you're looking for just burst damage one time the boss is done, then the Woodsith can give you some of the highest burst damage you can have for this character. That's why the best weapon for her by far is her own signature weapon, the 1000 Floating Dreams. Simply was made for elemental mastery, damage bonus, or more elemental mastery. You don't need to worry about being on field or off field or losing stacks. It's fantastic, 100% uptime and everything. It's great. But even when compared to the other competitors, while it is by far the best weapon, you're gonna have to ask yourself, is it really that much of a difference for me to care? Is 11 to 12% additional damage, or maybe a little bit more than that, 17, worth the pick? And with no endgame in Genshin, I'll have to leave that one up to you, okay? Now, if the weapon you were looking for as an off-field DPS isn't listed here, it's worse than the Magic Guide. That includes things that lose stacks like the Lost Prayers to the Sacred Wind, which is going to be a lot better on the on-field DPS build. But a lot of these other things are like 4 or 5% worse, so I wouldn't even try to use these. Please don't use these. But you really don't want to use any of these things. These were 10, 15, 20% worse than Magic Guide. Now, moving to the on-field tier list, a lot of things are going to be changed up, especially Magic Guide. Now, we're still going to use it as our baseline, but it is far from the best weapon here. And that's because we're going to lose that Bane passive. As an on-field DPS, you're just going to simply apply way too much Dendro when playing Nahida for you to constantly and consistently get that proc. Because not only are you having your E proc activate with no internal cooldown now, you also have your own normal attacks and your charge attack, which also has no internal cooldown on proccing reactions. You're gonna be able to remove a lot of this Electro and Hydra aura without really even trying, making this weapon a lot worse. Even our old favorite, the Widsith, is simply just gonna be better from the crit damage on it with no buff being applied. Not a whole lot better than Magic Guide, but it's still there. Yeah, that's a doozy. There's so many better books than Magic Guide. Sacrificial Fragments makes a return. Even Mappa Mare is better. All these ones are going to be listed above it. Blackcliff Agate are going to be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10% better DPS wise than our lovely Magic Guide. Now, the top 5 big winners here, we're gonna have to start with a maxed out Solar Pearl. It has a lot of crit chance, has some nice damage bonus that you can make use of because you are out there using your normal and charged attacks as a main on-field DPS. Lost Prayers to the Sacred Winds in Kagura's Verity are pretty great, but they still suffer a little bit even as an on-field DPS, because when you swap that character out, you lose all of those stacks. Lost Prayers is basically a 33 crit rate thing, and then if you have access to 8 seconds of combat, well, the first 4 you have no buff, the second you have 1 stack, and then you're off the battlefield to redo with somebody else. If you have a team that maintains Nahida on the field a lot, then these 2 weapons are going to be great for you. But if you're seeing yourself swap her off every 8 to 10 seconds to rebuff and bring her back out, don't use these weapons. You'd honestly probably have a better time with the Widsith. And obviously, by far the most consistent weapon, once again, and the best weapon for all 3 builds, is going to be her own unique weapon. Of course, it's going to be better than everything else because that's how the game's designed, but it's going to be, 10 to 12% better in some instances than others. Until then, slap that sub and I'll see you guys in the next one.